It's August 9th, 378 AD. Emperor Valens is in his tent outside Adrianople, fingers tapping the table. 50,000 Gothic warriors are camped 3 miles away. His nephew Gratian is bringing reinforcements. 2 days away, maybe 3. Every general in his army said the same thing. Wait. Valens looked at his generals. He looked at the Gothic camp. He thought about it. And then, for the first and last time in his entire career, he listened. In real history, he didn't. He charged. His cavalry got surrounded. His infantry collapsed. 2/3 of the Eastern Roman army died in 4 hours. Valens burned to death hiding in a farmhouse. Rome never recovered from that afternoon. But what if Valens waited? 3 days later, Gratian arrived with 40,000 Western legionaries. The combined force outnumbered the Goths 2-1. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Goths lost. Their leader, Fritigern, surrendered personally to Valens. "Now what do we do with them?" asked Gratian. "We already had a deal drafted," said Valens. "Land south of the Danube. Military service in return. They fight for us now. That is what they wanted before the whole mess started." This solved a problem Rome had been ignoring for 40 years. The legions were running out of Romans. Hiring Germanic mercenaries worked, but loyalty was flexible. Integrated Gothic soldiers fought harder. They had something real to protect: land, family, home. The Eastern Empire stabilized. Valens lived another 12 years. When he died in 390 AD of a perfectly ordinary fever, the empire did not split. In our timeline, Emperor Theodosius divided everything between his 2 sons in 395 AD. Arcadius got the east, Honorius got the west. Both were spectacularly incompetent. Honorius spent 408 AD, when Visigoths were besieging Rome, worried about his chickens, his actual chickens, named after Roman provinces. In this timeline, that didn't happen. The empire stayed one piece. So when Alaric and the Visigoths arrived at Rome's gates in 408 AD expecting the usual mess, they found a competent emperor giving competent orders. "We can negotiate," said Alaric. "Land in Gaul, payment in grain and silver." "Agreed," said Emperor Tertius, who was the third and not an idiot. Alaric got his land. Rome kept its walls. No sack, no catastrophe. This pattern kept repeating. Negotiate, incorporate, stabilize. Rome figured out something Europe took another 1,000 years to learn on its own. If you paid them fairly and gave them land, conquered people became Roman. Reliably. Every time. By 450 AD, 40% of the Roman military was Germanic by birth and Roman by choice. "I am Roman," said General Stilicho the Younger, whose grandfather was born on the Rhine. "Your great-grandfather was a tribesman. My grandfather built the aqueduct in Lugdunum. So, your point?" When Attila the Hun arrived in 451 AD, he found something he was not expecting. In our timeline, Rome scraped together allies at the last minute, won at the Catalonian plains, and barely survived. In this timeline, the Eastern and Western armies had been coordinating for 70 years. The supply lines worked. The intelligence network functioned. The treasury was not empty. Attila lost at Chalons, then lost again in Italy, then went home. "I was told Rome was dying," he said. "Old news," replied the messenger. After Attila, Rome had 3 quiet generations with no major external threat. 3 quiet generations is when Romans did their best work. By 500 AD, Roman engineers had concrete formulations that wouldn't be rediscovered until the 1800s. They built domed roofs spanning 140 feet, heated floors in public baths serving 3,000 people daily. The roads. By 520 AD, Rome maintained 50,000 miles of paved road across Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. For comparison, the U.S. interstate highway system today is 47,000 miles. Rome built that in the 2nd century, without excavators. In this timeline, they kept building. Roads don't just move armies, They move ideas. A farming technique developed in Syria reached Spain in 6 months. A medical text written in Alexandria was being copied in Carthage and London within 2 years. And a kid born in a village in Gaul in 530 AD could walk into an army recruiting office and end up in Constantinople at 22. "What is your name?" asked the recruiter. "Clovis, from Lutetia. In our history, your great-grandfather would have been king of the Franks. In this one, Clovis made centurion by age 35. Historians in this alternate 21st century call this period the Great Blending. Germanic tribes that invaded Rome in our timeline became Rome in this one, not by force, by practical calculation. Roman citizenship meant law, courts, trade access, and medical care. Who wants to live in a mud hut when there is underfloor heating in the Roman quarter down the road? By 600 AD, Latin had absorbed hundreds of Germanic words and was evolving fast. By 700 AD, it had split into 6 regional dialects that could still mostly understand each other. No Italian, no French, no Spanish, no Portuguese. Just Latin, with strong opinions about pronunciation. Meanwhile, something was happening in Arabia. In 610 AD, a merchant named Muhammad received revelations and founded what became Islam. In our timeline, the Arab conquests of 630 to 750 AD destroyed the Eastern Roman Empire and took North Africa and Spain. In this timeline, Rome was intact, organized, paying its soldiers on time. The first Arab forces hit Roman Egypt in 636 AD. They expected what they found in our timeline: a Byzantine bureaucracy so corrupt it had stopped paying its own armies. Instead, they found well-supplied legions with local Egyptian soldiers who wanted to keep their homes. Arab general Amr ibn al-As wrote home, "This will take considerably longer than expected," he wrote. "How much longer?" asked Caliph Umar. "I will let you know when I know." Islam spread anyway, through trade and scholarship along the Roman road network, not conquest. By 800 AD, roughly 30% of Eastern Roman citizens were Muslim. They paid taxes, they served in the legions, they built mosques next to Roman forums. The Senate in 812 AD passed a law protecting Muslim prayer times during active military service. The senator who proposed it was a Christian from Syria, whose grandfather was Frankish. By 900 AD, Roman physicians had determined that disease spread through contaminated water, not bad air, not divine punishment, water. This was 400 years earlier than in our timeline. They built closed sewage systems in every city with more than 10,000 residents. The Black Death, which killed 1 in 3 Europeans in 1347 AD in our timeline, never arrived here. Rome's infrastructure stopped it at the Persian border. 30 million people who died in our timeline did not die in this one. That number echoes forward through every century afterward. A physician who died at 28 in our timeline lived to 67 here. His students trained hundreds of others. By 1100 AD, Roman surgeons could treat appendicitis reliably. In our timeline, that surgery wasn't reliable until the 1880s. How many people died from a burst appendix between 1100 and 1880? They didn't die here. But here is where the alternate Roman Empire faced its hardest problem: population. By 1200 AD, the empire had 120 million people, more than Rome ever held in our timeline. Feeding them required constant agricultural innovation, and it kept working, until it almost didn't. In 1218 AD, the Mongols arrived. In our timeline, Genghis Khan destroyed the Islamic world, killed 40 million people, and burned cities that took centuries to rebuild. In this timeline, the Mongols hit the eastern Roman frontier in modern Iraq. They found not just walls, but a coordinated military intelligence system. The Roman Eastern Command had been studying Mongol tactics for 3 years through merchant reports. "We do not fight them in open field," announced General Flavius Marcellus in 1219 AD. "We use the roads to move faster than their supply columns. We cut their feed lines. We burn the grass. You want to burn our own fields? 300 miles east of the Euphrates. Yes. This is complete madness," said the aide. 200,000 Mongol horses cannot march for 3 months with no grazing. The Mongol advance stalled, then retreated. Genghis Khan died in 1227 AD, same as in our timeline. His empire fractured among his sons, same as in our timeline. Rome won by refusing to fight the war the Mongols wanted to fight. By 1300 AD, the Roman Empire controlled territory from Scotland to the Sahara, from Lisbon to Baghdad. "How do you run something that large?" asked a delegation from a small kingdom in Poland. "Very carefully," replied the Roman provincial administrator. "Each province has an elected council. The council sends delegates to the Senate. The Senate presents laws to the emperor. What if we disagree with the Senate? You sue them. You have courts that can overrule the Senate. We have courts that can overrule the emperor on specific constitutional matters. That sounds insane. It works. This legal system, refined over 8 centuries without interruption, had become something unusual. A contract signed in Carthage was legally enforceable in Constantinople. A merchant in Britain could sue a supplier in Egypt and expect a hearing within 6 months. This created something that did not exist in our timeline until the 1800s, a functioning continental market. Goods moved. Prices stabilized across thousands of miles. Investment happened at scale. By 1350 AD, Roman ships were regularly rounding the Cape of Good Hope, not discovering it. They had been there since 1180 AD. By 1350, they had permanent trading posts on the Swahili coast, in India and southern China. And the Chinese merchants kept mentioning something. A continent. Far to the east if you sail west. Rumors, mostly. Roman captain Lucius Drusus decided to follow the rumors in 1389 AD. He found the Bahamas in 1391 AD, 100 years before Columbus. People already lived there. They had gold. They had crops Rome had never seen. They spoke languages no one on the ship understood. The Roman Senate's response was complicated. "Conquer everything immediately," said the military senators. "Study and trade first," said the philosophers. A philosopher named Quintus Aurelius wrote a pamphlet in 1395 AD that changed the debate. "These people are citizens of their own land," he wrote. "Roman law requires us to treat them as such." The Senate debated it for 8 years. 8 full years. Meanwhile, Roman explorers mapped the Caribbean, contacted the Maya, and started learning their language. In 1403 AD, the Senate voted. The Americas were to be treated as allied territories, not conquered provinces. They sent diplomats, not soldiers. Mostly. The contact diseases were still devastating. Rome had no way to prevent that. 50 to 70% of indigenous populations died from Roman diseases in the first century of contact. The Senate in 1480 AD declared it an imperial emergency and called it the Great Dying. They sent physicians. They funded quarantine protocols. They did what they could. It was too late for tens of millions. But the death rate slowed by 1510 AD. In our timeline, nobody tried. The dying just happened. And back in the old world, something was brewing in 1450 AD. The printing press. In our timeline, Gutenberg's press in 1450 unleashed the Reformation, spread literacy, and cracked open the Catholic Church's monopoly on information. In this timeline, Rome already had printing presses, since 1180 AD. The Roman Senate funded it because they needed military manuals distributed across 50 provinces in weeks, not months. "Why do soldiers need printed manuals?" asked the treasury official. "Because training 300,000 men through oral instruction is how you get 30 different armies that cannot understand each other." "Oh, build it." Literacy in the Roman Empire by 1300 AD, 34% of adults. England in 1300 AD in our timeline, roughly 5%. By 1450 AD in this timeline, Roman literacy had reached 61%, which meant that when a monk named Gregorius of Milan began writing about church corruption in 1455 AD, a lot of people could read what he wrote. The Roman Church, 800 years old and never interrupted by a Dark Ages, was different from our timeline's Catholic Church. It had internal courts, regional variations, elected councils at every level. When Gregorius nailed his complaints to the door of the Senate building, not a church door, the Senate formed a committee to review his claims. "You cannot reform religion with a committee," protested the High Bishop. "We are not reforming religion. We are reviewing administrative irregularities." "That is the same thing. One of them has better paperwork." A reformation happened. Slowly, bureaucratically, without anyone burning each other at the stake. Mostly. By 1600 AD, the Roman Empire was the dominant power on 4 continents, 200 million subjects, 40 living languages, one legal framework holding it all together, a postal system that moved letters from London to Baghdad in 18 days, and a military that had not lost a major war in 300 years. It was still an empire, one person at the top with enormous power, but 200 million people who could read kept that person from going completely off the rails. Mostly. Emperor Constantius VI in 1622 AD tried to ban books critical of the imperial family. The Senate overruled him in 6 weeks. "But I am the emperor," he said. "The courts say your decree violates the Edict of 1301, so it is void." "But I am the emperor." "We heard you the first time." By 1700 AD, Roman mines in Britain were using steam-powered water pumps, not because of a single inventor's genius, because Roman engineers had been building on each other's work for 1,200 years without a gap. The Industrial Revolution began in 1712 AD in Roman Britain, not because Britain was special, because Roman infrastructure investment made industrial production economically rational there first. By 1800 AD, Roman trains ran from London to Rome, 40 hours. That is still pretty good. The question historians in this alternate 2025 still argue about: was any of this actually good? No Dark Ages, better medicine, a slower death toll in the Americas, 30 million people saved from the Black Death. Also, one empire controlling global trade for 1,600 years. Roman roads were free to use, but Roman law governed every contract written on them. Roman values baked into every trading agreement across 5 continents. Latin as the language of commerce. Roman law as the law of commerce. You adapted, or you did not trade. In 2025, the Roman Empire still exists, headquartered in Rome, Senate of 600 elected representatives, an emperor elected by popular vote for a 12-year term. The current emperor, Marcus Aurelius VI, is a former judge from Roman North Africa. 4 languages. Never led an army. This would have confused every emperor in Roman history. "You won no wars," asked the statue of Augustus. "We have not had one in 70 years. How do you control people without war?" Trade agreements, courts, strongly worded resolutions. That sounds exhausting. Less exciting than conquest. But the roads still work. What would our world look like if Rome never fell? Probably less messy, definitely less free. One language, one law, one currency, fewer competing ideas about how to govern people, but also one sewage system that actually works across 40 countries, and a medical tradition 1,200 years older than ours. A world without the Black Death is a world with 40 million more people alive in 1400. Those 40 million had children and grandchildren. The alternate world of 2025 has 11 billion people, and they all answer to the same legal system, more or less. More or less. One battle, 378 AD. One emperor chose to wait 3 days instead of charging. That decision ran forward 16 centuries and changed everything. Rome's greatest weapon was never the legions. It was the ability to absorb people who came to destroy it and turn them into Romans instead. When that worked, nothing else came close. And in this timeline, it kept working. We talked about Rome staying alive. Now imagine it had a rival that matched it. What if China had discovered Europe first?